Real talk, raw feelings. This is, if I'm being honest, a podcast by a tuna grade. I'm your host, Nishani Jayawardena, therapist, founder, human work in progress, and joining me is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Himgauri Alve, founder and a creative mind behind Tessellations and a fellow big leap taker.
Together, we're creating space for conversations that matter. The messy, honest, mental health kind of realness that too often gets pushed aside. So pull up a seat, grab a tea or a therapy snack because we're diving in.
And what are we talking about?
Um, I figured we would stick with something that's very basic, but also something that gets overlooked often. How much is too much or too little? And the main topic is communication.
That is so important in today's day and age because we have forgotten first what it is to communicate because everything is taken for granted. And then we don't know what is the exact kind of conversation that you want. And as somebody who has gone through something, I wanted to ask you, how do you know with someone how much is a right amount of communication and how much is not? Like, where do you draw a line and be like, oh, that's now overstepping, or you're like talking a little bit beyond? So, at what point do you decide to draw a line when it comes to communication?
Yeah, since you poached this topic and you suggested, like, let's talk about communication, I've been thinking a lot about how do people receive me and how do I know that someone else understands what I am saying? So I think it sounds like we've both been reflecting on sometimes it can feel like we're talking too much or expressing ourselves too much, or perhaps maybe it's not landing on the other person who we're talking with. So what I have noticed is, especially as a therapist, communication seems to be the trend, right? That's a topic that I often bring up in a session with a client, whether it's the client feeling like they're not talking enough or not sharing enough with their family and friends, or they feel like they wish they would have said more, or they wish they said too much. So there's so many different variables in this. Personally, I used to feel like I've said too much, like I would talk too much, that I would share and overshare extra details when in reality I just needed to keep it simple and keep it moving. And then I met later in my adult life, I met a couple of people in my life who kind of was intrigued by what I was sharing, and then they would want to ask me more. So I think communication comes down to the other end, like the receiver end. Like, are they respond to it? Do I feel like I'm being heard? Do I feel like the person understands what I am saying and they can keep going off of the conversation, much like what we're doing today and in our
Mm-hmm.
podcast, where we kind of go off of each other and we build upon each other's own perspective. And this is, in a way, an expression of ourselves and us communicating with the world or whoever is listening to us today.
That is very true. I mean, we all go off each other's energies, and sometimes the people that come in front of you kind of portray the right kind of energy, take the right, all the information that they have that you're going to offer them, and later kind of use it against you. Then at that point, does it become overcommunication? And I do have another question, which is overcommunication ever like a trauma response?
Yeah, that's actually an excellent observation. There are plenty of times where I've noticed where trauma or the feeling of being unsafe or just realizing that you're not feeling unsafe, which is also a trauma response, it kind of forces us to try to survive. And sometimes survival is being understood by the people around you. And in order to be understood, we have to use our voice box. Sometimes it's behavior, it's facial expressions, it's body language, all of those things. But most of the time, the way that we understand each other is through language, which comes down to communication, right? And you and
Right.
I already have a different mother tongue that we grew up with. I think in your case, more than one language that you grew up learning when you were little. So that communication piece in the trauma piece, people start to overshare as a way of wanting to be welcomed and understood and feeling safe. Which, and this has happened to me, I've gone to random places and I've met strangers who have overshared about their life. In the span of 15 minutes, I've learned about their trauma, things that have happened in their life over the course of the year, or something that was really happening that they may not have found much benefit from sharing it with me, but somehow they felt like, I guess the word is overshare, right? They
Yeah.
overshared in a social situation that seemed misplaced. Obviously, because I'm a therapist, I happen to look at that and be like, okay, this person could use that reassurance, right? That validation. And I try not to get into therapy mode when it's a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere. However, to your point, trauma makes us act certain ways, and oversharing or communicating a lot is one of those things that does tend to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Like, okay, I'm a person, I love oversharing. As an individual, I'm an open book. Take as much information as you want because you cannot do anything with it.
Yeah.
If I was lying, if there was anything for me to hide, I mean, I wouldn't even tell you basic things, but I'm more of a person who likes to overshare. But then that side of me kind of changes when I'm going through something, right? Like every day your life is not rosy and merry. But
Yeah.
then in those situations, I completely shut down. I have a very flip side. I would not talk or not communicate anything until I am done, until I'm on the other side. And then I reflect back and then I say that, oh, I wish I told this at that point. Oh, I wish I did that. Because I feel like my this behavior kind of led to a miscommunication with one of my friends.
Sure.
And again, like her point of view was not wrong, nor was mine. Now, who is to blame in this situation? Because obviously, from my point of view, oh, she should have understood. Versus like her sin is that, like, I should have communicated, but should have, would have, we can go around it, but it's gone, it's in the past. But then, how do you move on? And next time, if you're kind of like going about it, because as I'm going through this entire situation, I realized that I wouldn't have known what better to communicate at that point. I was going through a bunch of my own trauma, and the other person probably was going through theirs. So
Yeah.
technically, nobody was wrong.
Right.
But then in that situation, what is the right mode of communication? Or you just let it be and make sure that you resurface this conversation when things are a little silent. Like, I would want to know from you, and I would like to know from people who are listening to us also, like, how do you kind of deal with a situation like this? Because when you are in your own situation, you are in your spiral, you cannot think of the other person because you're so consumed by your things. At one point, your spiral is done. You get out of the situation. What do you do then?
Wow. Bringing in a personal example like that, something that sounds like that's happening to you in real time, is a great way. Because what I'm hearing is that the other person's like, you should have told me, right? You should have communicated what you're going through. But what if you couldn't even figure out what you were going through at the time, right? Communication
Exactly.
requires you to understand and reflect and have had all of the awareness. Like, now you and I are communicating about the importance of sharing what you have to say, but before you know what you want to say, you have to first understand the feeling that you're experiencing underneath the thought process that's going to
Exactly.
come out, right, from your voice box. And to your point, it's not that anybody's wrong, but this happens often. And I want to add to this personal experience. This week in my business, I have been kind of noticing with a particular person that I'm working with that my communication is not landing, or the way that I'm expressing myself, I'm communicating my needs, it seems to not be landing with this other person. And I have to reflect and think, like, is that because I am not communicating efficiently, or is it because the other person is not receiving or understanding, whatever the case may be, and somehow there is this miscommunication, right, where we keep missing each other. And this happens all too often in almost every relationship in my entire life. So I know this is not something that you and I are experiencing alone. And I'm pretty sure whoever is listening is going to nod their head and be like, yep, I've definitely had an instance where I felt I communicated
Uh-huh.
everything. I put it all out there. And then somehow the other person comes back as like, you didn't do enough. Or I wish you would have told me all this, and so on and so forth. So there is that battle of where do you draw the line? And that's the purpose of this conversation, right? Like, how do we assess what is too much? And when do we
To
know?
sorry, but like to add to your point, like, don't you feel, because you shared some information, and again, like bringing two examples of your personal life and my personal life,
Yeah.
aren't there some things that are meant to be understood?
Hmm,
You
mm,
know what I mean? Every time do we have to voice word to word and make it 100% clear? Or I feel like after a certain time, may it be a business relationship or may it be a personal relationship, I
yeah.
feel after a certain point, there are those lines that the other person understands.
Mm,
is that like every conversation you have to bring it up and make sure you kind of like lay them in front of you, or
Mm-mm.
you kind of let that be? Because honestly, like sometimes I feel like, oh, it's understood, right? Like that's what I would think if I feel like somebody is not communicating with me, right? I would be like, hey, that person must be going through something. Oh, probably this is happening in their life. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm mad at the minute, but the next time that they decide to come and approach me, I kind of bring it up. I'm like, was this because of a certain thing or what happened? And then that leads me to a second point of confrontation. Not everybody is okay with confrontation, and it all boils down to communication, because
Yeah.
as easy it is to use your words, it's equally difficult to use your words, because if somebody comes and kind of corners you, you are put in a spot. And is that something that you're ready to face?
Ooh, that confrontation. I mean, the amount of people that I have encountered that would shy away from confrontation just because confrontation does not always have to be an argument, right? It just means that you want to hold the other person accountable or you want to hold yourself accountable, whatever the case may be, and you just want to be assertive in that, hey, this happened to me, this is happening between us. Can we get through this? We are blessed with a voice box. I know people who are not capable of speaking their truth, and they use different forms of communication, like ASL, right? So
Definitely.
there is, and I've realized that communication looks different in every language, and that's
Yes.
something I really wanted to jump into, which I know I'm getting ahead of myself here. But language and communication, like right now, we are speaking in English. This is not my main language. It's something I had to learn mastering every single day. And when I talk about confrontation in the early years when I was in the United States, I would absolutely shy away from ever having to like, because especially when emotions get involved, because confrontation
Yes.
often means there's an emotion involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be anger, that could be sadness, that could be tears. Like there could be a range of things that come up when confrontation is at the table, right? And
Definitely.
I was thinking, like, I would shy away from it because when I'm in that heated emotional space, it's almost like I would forget the
Mm-hmm.
language, the English language, the words that I wanted to use or how I wanted to express myself. It's like all of that would go away. And a little bit of the Sinhalese would come out where my language would come out. I'm like, wait, that's not how I want to express thought. And the sentence structure is different. Now I have to translate that in my mind with the how my rebuttal, right? So confrontation is at like the peak of what happens when communication is not received and understood well. We all want
Exactly.
to be heard. We want to be validated. We want someone to actually actively care about what we have to
Mm-hmm.
say. And when that's not happening, all of a sudden we feel left out. And that starts to create this like bubble of emotion, which turn into confrontation. Now we're talking about a regular conversation here, but in any capacity. I'm curious about what you think about confrontation and how you have noticed yourself experiencing it.
So I am somebody who kind of likes to get into a confrontation zone, because sometimes that gives you a chance to think and explain yourself as well. Because again, like I do suffer with this problem of like communicating when I'm going through something. But
Okay.
when I'm going through something, there are more often than times, but I have always offended somebody in some other way. Offend is a big word, but
Yes.
I do not care about other people at that point, because I'm going through something and it's my journey. And
Right.
so, for like where I'm coming from and why would I feel like that is, I've been very solo and single handed in my life, right? Like it's been almost close to 2 years that now I'm married. And for the first time, I'm experiencing like a partnership. Like I can rely on somebody.
Right.
Didn't have that in my life. So I was always in the fight mode. So
Mm,
if anything that happened to me, I only knew that I had to save myself. Nobody else was going to come and do it for me. Like
yeah.
nobody was going to come and fight any battle for me. Nobody was going to make sure that I was okay. Yes,
Yeah.
my parents were there, but emotionally, financially, and everywhere, I support my parents. And you understand it better than anybody else.
Yeah.
And in those situations, you cannot even fall back on anyone. I'm a single child. I have no siblings who can understand this.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have cousins. I have a great friends system around me that keeps me grounded, keeps me, going afloat. But then again, like at a certain point, everybody is human. They're going to have their emotions, and same with me. So
Mm.
in this situation, like most of the times, like my response is, I don't know, like I shut down.
Mm.
And it's very difficult for the other person to kind of take hold from there and move on.
Yeah.
But honestly, like it's been what, good a year or so, like my husband has kind of introduced, or I don't know, without saying, or just him being next to me, I have learned the importance of talking at the minute, because
Mm.
you don't, I never felt safe before, so that also ties down to this. Now
Yeah.
I do feel that safety, and when that safety happens immediately, like you're just like, hey, listen, I know I can deal with this today itself, right? Like the problem is today, I can deal with it today. I don't have to wait for more for it to be done and then deal with it. So like that's my take on it, that you have to feel a certain way. You need to know that you're safe to be able to confront something. And if you're
Mm.
not feeling safe, if you're feeling too overwhelmed with everything, you're never going to go and confront, right? And again, the confronting comes with everybody's personality types as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not very confrontational. They feel like, oh no, and I don't know if I'm right here, but I feel like it is even a part of people pleasing.
Mm. Yep.
You're only going to say the right things so
Yes.
that you get the right kind of responses and nothing is messed up over there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel, I don't know if I want that kind of relationship around me, because yeah, I am different, you're different,
Right.
and we are going to face issues, right? Like we are going to not be always on the same page, and it's okay, because then when you kind of come together, it is somewhere or the other a confrontation. It is
Mm.
somewhere or the other like you are discussing some things. So that's how I feel, like it comes through safety, it comes through conversation, it comes through your personality.
Yeah.
And again,
Absolutely.
it all comes down to the similar point of like, it's every individual has different needs.
it's it's interesting that you kind of communicate about how in a relationship, right, in a marriage, how you're learning to find that safety, how in the past you may have resorted to like more confrontational type of conversation. And I want to bring this thought and like kind of attach the idea of our culture and how that influences
Yes.
why we sometimes feel like we have to confront in order to feel heard and accepted,
Yeah,
especially as a girl. And I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm pretty sure you can resonate with this, but as a woman
definitely.
from Asia, there is a lot of silencing of what we have to say. And I just visited Sri Lanka like literally a month ago to celebrate my
Mm-hmm.
brother's wedding. And while I was there, I realized just how much I had forgotten that in Lanka, in the community, it is not so common for a girl, for a woman to communicate, to just put herself out there, to speak her truth, to be confrontational if she was upset
Mm-hmm.
of what somebody said or something that wasn't said and needed to be said and whatever. Like if I wanted to bring that up, it just was not welcome or received very well. And I would have to get into confrontation mode just so the community or the people around me will receive what I have to say. And even then, with confrontation comes an emotion, and people love to kind of label that as you're being emotional, and therefore like we're not even going to take you seriously anymore. Whatever you're communicating has gone out the window because you're a girl and now you're in an emotion and you're having an episode. Like I've heard
Yeah.
all of these things. I understand why you say like I like the confrontation, or I used to like the confrontation part of it, because only then are you potentially feeling more liberated, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm going to just say this and I'm going to say it with vigor because I feel I have to assert myself this way
Definitely.
for it to be understood, right? What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. 100% whatever you said, even I agree on everything. And I'm going to add to our Asian culture a little bit more, saying that I don't know, for some reason they feel a man's voice is important and not a woman's voice. And
Hmm.
again, like I do not want to bring a lot of these things and issues, and everybody knows.
Right.
Again, it's not very limiting to Asian culture, it's in multiple cultures.
Yes.
Again, like as a woman, as somebody who is independent, would kind of feel very limited, right? Again, this is a very personal experience, but till the age of 30, 32, I never met my husband.
Hmm.
And before that, whenever I took any decisions or whenever I made any kind of a suggestion, it was never received well. And
Yeah.
the reason was because I was single and I was a
Yep.
girl. How much, whatever things I did in my life, I was good at what I did. I was living by myself. I was like, nobody was supporting me. I had a good job, XYZ, everything was working fine. But
Yeah.
everybody looked at me with that face of like, where is the man in your life? Now, cut to I have a man in my life, and suddenly everybody starts is okay or starts taking me a little bit seriously. And I'm like, no, I am still me. Now, part of me has this man changed,
Yeah.
you know? And why am I taken seriously like today? Like, that is something, it kind of again boils down to the part of like, did we go wrong somewhere? Like, ages ago, did our ancestors felt a certain way and then that's how it started?
Mm.
Where did that communication go wrong? Because if you think of Hindu mythology, if you think of a lot of things, women were more powerful. Women
Right.
were more, like you talk about goddesses. We have a lot of these conversations when we talk about different kind of goddesses and everything. We've never spoken about a male god that way. We always talk about, oh, I have this goddess energy right now. Oh, I feel like Durga energy. Or we have spoken about Hecate, and
Yeah.
it's all about your callings and everything. Then what happened, right? Like,
Yeah.
where was it a part of communication that like the two genders couldn't do?
Mm.
I'm just like trying, like, I'm opening up, I feel like a bigger box or a second
Yeah.
conversation, which
I
is
love it.
between a man and a woman. Like, that's what I feel like the gender trauma as well. But, like, yeah, like, it all again somehow boils down to communication
Yeah.
for
This
me.
is this is absolutely a much needed conversation because it goes so much deeper than what we experience on a day-to-day basis, right? Because communication is super important, yes. And then there is like nuances that are deeper in the layers of our ancestral lineage. And you're so right about Asia. And again, I know we are kind of broadening the globe by saying Asia. And I do believe this does apply in a lot of other Asian countries, but specifically if we're just going to go off of our personal experiences so that we are not offending anybody who feels like that is not the case for them.
Mm-hmm.
As far as we're concerned in our culture, it seems that a woman's presence is only considered important and worthy if she had somebody else, specifically a man, who takes ownership of her, right? So we're like an object that needs to be in possession of. And once
Yeah.
we are in that possession space, all of a sudden we are quote unquote allowed to
Yeah.
speak, right? We can talk about things and whatever. As somebody who is a divorcee, my culture often loves to look down upon women who have been through a divorce. And
Definitely.
I know that's another thing in our culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
When I attempt to speak, and mind you, in the United States, I truly feel that my voice is accepted, that my communication is received. People here want to hear me speak. They encourage me to say more. There's other women, and like again, I consider all women goddess energy at all times. We're
Mm-hmm.
all divine feminine. We all have that, men, women, and otherwise. We all have these divine energies within us. And so how is it that it's so different here, right? Because I freely communicate here. Even this podcast. I mean, the fact that we're both doing this is unheard of where we come from in a way. It's just
Yeah.
not the same vibe. But over here, we get feedback. People love what we're talking about. They feel like they can align with what we are saying, and we're just being real. And the purpose of the podcast is to express that honesty and our lived experience. And yeah, we're talking about communication, but the entire purpose of a podcast is communication.
No, and definitely it all boils down to start having these conversations with somebody who is close to you and explore that side of a person being right next to you. Because, yeah, we are today, everybody listens to a different kind of podcast, but what do you take back? You take back some knowledge, but
Mm.
how much of it do you apply in your real life?
Hmm. Yeah.
You kind of don't. Like, you listen to it and you're just like, yeah, another person, let's move on. But think about it, every person has an experience that they've lived that nobody else has,
Yes.
and it's very catered to you, and only you know what you have lived. And having that conversation, opening up to the person, helps you kind of build your relationship with the person as well. And again, like, every part of the way you kind of talk, you kind of communicate, will let them know more of you.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a problem to let someone who is close to you know a lot about you. because I think it's more of a strength that you can let somebody else see who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Versus like when you start like there are times that I do not want to give a lot of my information out. Like I do not talk to people immediately. Like I take some time. I'm more on energies and vibes. I kind of let it be for some time, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I think I'm okay with this person, and that's when I get chatty.
Okay.
But then again, every person has their own things, right? Like some of them come with the energy of like, I know I'm here, I know I own this room, and I know what I'm talking about, right?
True.
Do those kind of people have certain kind of trauma? Like I don't know what it would be. Like they're coming with this personality before,
Yeah.
so that they put out a show in front of people of like, hey, look who I am, and
Yes.
to hide their own personality.
Mm.
Could that be one of the reasons? Because we all have those kind of friends, right? Like somebody who is too extrovert, and
Yes.
somebody who kind of takes some time but then has actual kind of value to add to your life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's such a good segue because sometimes less is more, right? I
Yes.
have met people who share very little, but whenever they do, they're dropping gems. Like they make people think, they make you reflect and forces you to go inwards to think about what did this person actually mean and so on and so forth. I see your point about how when you shut down, like when you give yourself like time to process like who's around me, do I feel good with these people energetically, are we aligned, and with that you have this freedom to start expressing yourself freely and to communicate more of what you are experiencing in your day to day. And part of that is, coming back to our cultural differences, because I'm remembering a question that we had kind of prepped for this podcast, even though we're not
Mm-hmm.
even going off of the script right now. What happens when in our culture, when people think they are protecting the relationship by not speaking up, by not
Mm-hmm.
and keeping things hidden? That's something
Yes.
that I wanted to bring in too, because I noticed that where my mom and dad would tell me, like, do not tell anybody anything. Don't disclose what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing with your life or where you're going or where you're at and how you feel. Keep it very minimal. And so there are these signals about what's okay to be communicated and what's not okay to be communicated. And sometimes it comes from other people around you. Now, I have had to learn to be free. I've had to
Mm-hmm.
teach myself how to just be free and not absorb what other people have to say and what that means for me, because everybody has an opinion. And that's another thing with communication. Opinions.
Yes.
Everybody's got
Yes.
an opinion about everything, right? What do you
Uh-huh.
what do you take in, let go? What do you actually follow? Like these are all things that I often think about because, for instance, in a therapy room, my clients know that I am a vault, right? I'm a
Mm-hmm.
trusted vault, meaning
Yeah.
you tell me anything and I will keep that information secret forever, right?
Yeah.
That's something I really am passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even though I am supposed to be there for that person during the hour of our session, there are still
Right.
times when my clients will not disclose everything to me. They will not communicate, or they will communicate a story that's kind of fabricated that makes it
Right.
good. Or sometimes they're not telling me all the details, so I'm not really seeing the
Right.
picture. We talk about when is it too much. I
Mm-hmm.
often appreciate clients who give me a lot of detail because it kind of
Yeah.
makes me draw out the picture of what it is that's going on around them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are times when I have met individuals who share just enough information for me to be curious, but then I'm also not going to be intrigued by my curiosity and ask them questions because I'm like, whatever you want to share is what I
Uh-huh.
want to work with. So it's fascinating that we're having this conversation about how important communication is because I often contemplate, like, this person chose not to give me all the details, and I am not understanding them because they
Mm-hmm.
haven't given me all those details. And then I have to
Yeah.
poke and prod. But that's because I care to poke and prod and ask, hey, tell me more
Exactly.
about this. What did you mean by this? And coming back to relationships,
Mm-hmm.
it takes time for two people, even if they speak the same language, it takes time
Yes.
for two people to figure out what actually works for each other. Because when I get upset, much like you, I can shut down. I am not a speaker. And that's how my partner knows something is off with this woman because now all of a sudden she's not speaking, and he knows that's my biggest talent here, that I speak freely.
And God bless us because we have this face. Anybody and everybody can read it on the face that something is terribly wrong. Like there's a small thing. It was not with my husband, but it was a weekend morning and I booked a nail appointment or something like that. Like it was a very casual situation.
Right.
But again, like they just called me and they're like, oh no, your appointment is cancelled for whatever reason. And I was like, yes, I get it, but what can I do? But like you offered me this service and
Right.
that's why I booked it online. You could have told me before that I had to call you and book and then kind of let me know. But whatever, the back and forth and situation just got worse and tense. And at one point, he told me, you know what, I'm just going to hang up on you because my tone also changed a little bit. And I'm like, you are somebody who's offering me a service. It's not like you're giving it to me for free. You know, offer me another solution and I'm willing to take it, but offer, show the eagerness to do that.
Right.
And sorry, I feel a little bit privileged that way is because I have spent a lot of my time on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Service industry over there is crazy, right? Like people are going to bend over backwards to make sure that you are being given the right or more than what you're paying for also. So I come from that background. And here I was just like, if you're offering it to me for free, I understand. But the actual part of this conversation, I was so mad. My husband was sleeping. It was early in the morning that it happened. And then he wakes up. And then he comes like a little mouse in the room because he just couldn't understand by my face and my body language what went wrong.
Yeah.
He's just like, I just woke up. I have not done anything. And why am I being... And I was like, hey, no, listen, let's sit down. And as again, you mentioned, like at that point, the side of me that came out, even he doesn't usually see it. All of my mother tongue, my Hindi, my Bombay Hindi, like people who are Indian would understand what when I say the word Bombay Hindi because it's actual that taporiness and everything that came out at that point, and he just let me be for some time. But again, like you know, like that is another thing when it comes to our partners, like they do understand our body language, they change. He let me kind of vent it out. I kind of communicated what I felt and I felt at ease after that, right? Like I told him that, hey, this is how I feel. And again, I get it, like probably I feel a little bit privileged right now, but see where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Like if I was 100% born and brought up here, probably it wouldn't affect me as much. It's another day in somebody's life.
Yeah.
But again, like these are very important parts that you kind of need to address with the people who are really close to you. It can be something extremely small, but it can have a bigger impact just for you because your circumstances have been different.
Yeah.
Me and my husband, we both have the same mother tongue, which is Marathi.
Yeah.
But we only end up speaking in English.
Sure.
As we said, communicate, and we know multiple languages between the both of us. I think we know Hindi, Marathi, English is like the widely known between the both of us, but we end up speaking a lot in English. And again, when that situation also happens, like some days it's still very difficult to kind of get your point across because if I have to explain in Marathi, his Marathi is not that great as mine. And then at that point, I'm so emotional that I would want to express it in my language, that mother tongue that I've grown up with, versus he is brought up in America. So for him, his first always language is going to be English.
English. Wow.
And he can execute all his thoughts very well in English. Again, like there's no communication gap. You know, at that weak moment of mine, like sometimes I just want him to understand.
Yeah.
Like, you know, cultural references also or something like that. When I tell him about something, I'm like, but you understand, right? This is how it's in Indian culture. He's like, I don't. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You are just an Indian boy, like 100% who is an American by every which way.
Right. And that's also a different communication barrier, right? Because
exactly.
You want him to resonate with the experiences that you've had, which, by the way, I do believe that your exposure to Dubai and the fact that you lived in Dubai for many, many years, over a decade, right? It kind of brings a really important perspective because communication in Dubai, I was curious about that. You talk about, because obviously I'm not sure how familiar you are with Arabic, but that language is also very different. It can be really complicated to somebody who is not a native speaker. So I was curious about how you observed communication when you were in Dubai versus your experiences here in the United States with people.
So I'm going to start and I'm going to say something. So it's basically communication in Dubai. You're dealing with different kind of communities, right? Like Arabic is the main dominant language because you
Right.
have a lot of Middle Easterns kind of living there.
Right.
And then you have from India, you have a lot of people from south of India, specifically like South Indians that are a lot in Dubai.
Okay.
You have a lot of Sindhis also. Like Indians, we have bunch of them. Like it's a mixed bag. But then again, like, Arabic is still like a dominant language everywhere.
Sure.
And a lot of like small grocery stores or something like that are owned by Malayalis, are owned by a Pakistani, are owned
Okay.
by most of our Desi communities, right? Like someone who is either from Sri Lanka, India, or Bangladesh,
Really?
Pakistan, like all those. Again, we all grew up with uh, our mother tongue, and English was not the first language, and we
Right.
learned English. Again, like people who come from a little lesser known backgrounds and things, like for
Right.
them, they only understand keywords, but there is no right grammar that's been used.
It's almost like, yeah, the filler words are not there, right? And
Exactly.
if you spoke like that at an American gas station, that person's gonna think that you are so rude to just like that all of those elements are missing. However, nobody's offended in Dubai because
Yeah.
those please and
This
thank yous are not there.
conversation is so funny. I'm laughing. Like when you understand, like these taxi drivers, right? Like for me, it was easier to communicate with them because I spoke Hindi. Urdu and Hindi are somewhere closer to each other.
Hmm.
I could tell them, they could tell me. But imagine an Arab has taken the taxi. They do not know the words. They
Right.
only communicated in the main words, like where you may go. Like it's literally where do you want to go? But where
Right.
do you want to go rather than the where you may go? Like
Yeah.
it's very like straight.
Yes. And see, that's what I mean by communication looks different in so many different worlds, right? There's
Exactly.
micro cultures within a culture that speak differently. It's the same thing when I go to Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan accent and the way of communicating, even though we're speaking in English, right? It is a different communication when we want something with each other and when we're expressing some things. And that brings me to how communication can be without words in our
Yes.
culture. That is something that really blew my mind when I first came here because and again, when I go back, I told you I went back to Sri Lanka, right? My mom will be like, "Can you grab what's over there? No, not there. Over there. Over there. No, right there. Right there. Right behind you." And quite literally, I have no idea what she's talking about because when I look behind me or wherever she means by over there, it is
Uh-huh.
entire wall filled with lots of random things. And somehow she's offended that I did not understand her communication of I want you to grab that thing over there. So over in
Okay,
the
I'm going to resonate a little with your mother right now because I do that a lot as well. And my husband is like, "Can you just tell me where?" And I'm like, "It's very evident it's there. There's only
it's right
one thing
there.
over there."
Uh-huh. Right,
And he's
exactly.
just like, "Yeah, learn to use your words." And I'm like, "Oh my
And
God, I'm in America." Yes.
exactly. And that I think is the change that I went through in my 13 to 15 years in the United States where I now have to be very descriptive. When I say over there, I mean, hey, on that table behind you, onto your left-hand side, on top of that book and whatever. And I would tell my mom
Yes.
like, hey, you could break that over there down to
Uh huh.
more specific communication. And for us, in our cultures, there's a lot of body language, just like the Italian
Yes.
culture. And I know there's other cultures that kind of match this vibe. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of body language where we do not need to communicate in words, where we do revert to our own hand gestures. Like even as I'm speaking, I know the whoever's listening cannot see my hands, but I'm always using my hands when I speak. And
And
that's
whoever is not, like, they're obviously not seeing us, but they can see me nod, the Indian nod that's happening
yes,
constantly. Because I'm
right.
kind of affirming with everything that Nishani has to say.
Exactly. And that is good. And to me, that's sufficient for me to know that you are engaged. To me,
Mm-hmm.
I do the minimal encourages, like the mm-hmm,
Mm,
sure, yeah, go on. Like I would add that probably because I have now been in the US for so long where I
right.
recognize people are not always responsive to the nod of like, yeah, keep going. But in our
Yeah,
culture, it is the nod. There's not a lot of words.
exactly.
They're not I mean, they might interrupt you, but there is not a lot of words. So these old school ways where we didn't have to talk about everything, but there
Uh-huh.
was this ways of us understanding each other through our expression, through the subtle changes in our tone. Like, again, confrontation means that your tone changes, right? You were
Changes.
just telling me about that example with the nail salon. Your tone changed because
Changed.
you wanted to communicate your frustration about an expectation that you had that this gentleman on the other side of that call would accommodate you. And as a
Mm-hmm.
client, they would do whatever they needed to do to make sure that you as a customer was happy, which is something
Right.
you experienced really well in Dubai. But in the
Yes.
United States, it is not the case. It is often not. In fact, I can affirm with you that I've had many experiences where I felt like this person genuinely didn't care if I was in there coming to their business or not. And I'm a small business owner. We're both small business
Yeah.
owners. Communication is so important because we want people to tell us if we're not doing something correctly. We want people to engage with us and
Mm-hmm.
have that back and forth. And so yeah, I know I'm kind of pulling on different things here, but that nonverbal cues, body gestures as a means of communication within cultures, I think that's so valuable. And it is not something I've noticed in the United States, which I miss when I go to Sri Lanka. I go back to that. I remember. But yeah, I can just say over there and someone actually understands what I'm talking about. You know, I don't
Uh-huh.
have to break that down for them to describe to them. Now, in my mother's case, it's not the same. She quite literally will just be like, over there on that shelf. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Which shelf? You know, and I would have to slow down. I would go to her and I'd be like, Mom, I am no longer understanding your language. And my brother knew. My brother knew what she was talking about. And so,
I'm
you know,
telling you.
communication.
And yes, like it's been a year and a half, but even I'm learning through this process and I'm understanding. And yeah, like recently I was talking to someone that also had a similar journey like me. She pretty much grew up in Dubai and then she moved to US, right? She got
Mm,
married, she moved to US, and then we were trying kind of understanding, are we wrong, right? Like if we are
mm,
expecting something, if we want a certain level of conversation, certain level of understanding from someone, are we wrong to expect that? Because
mm.
like when we kind of would communicate, like when I say that, listen, like, I didn't even have to go and pump my own gas, like there was somebody, like
Right.
for a lot of people here, they would think, oh, what kind of privilege, like does she, like who does she think she is, and like
Yeah, yeah.
that. But it was a very normal thing, right? Like if I had to call gas, like if I didn't want to go and if I had to call the service to kind of come and fuel my car up also, it was not like as if I had to pay extra money. It was the same price as I would go to the gas station and do it. But it
Wow.
was just comfort for me. But like yeah, when we were trying to communicate and then I had this conversation with her, it's like this is just one example of it. But
Yeah.
how much do people understand you where you're coming from? Because a lot of people have
Mm,
not experienced that, and it is now for us because we have moved. We
yes.
need to tone everything down and start communicating again from base. We are the ones who have to like slow ourselves down and be okay to that change, right? Like they have not changed. Like people here have not decided to move, but like her and I and similar people like us have
Yes.
decided to make that jump, right? Like,
Right.
and again, like falling into the patterns, learning how to communicate the way people here communicate now, right? Like
Yes.
back in Dubai for me, like I would end up using words like haram and oh my god, like inshallah and everything in my
Yeah.
constant conversations because that was something I kept hearing, right? Like it was an energy thing that you kind of bounced off each other. When
Right.
you go back to India, you end up using a lot of Hindi and Marathi words in between, and
Yes.
this honestly has been the first time in my life that I would speak 100% English to a lot of people here,
Yeah.
because some way or the other I have always been in a space where I have used other language to kind of be a filler in between.
Mm,
And because I am bilingual, the filler words also help you a lot.
yes.
I'm going to tell you just a basic word that every Indian uses. It's called jugaad. Okay. And when I say the word jugaad, that means find a smartest way to get your shit done. It's
Okay.
exactly that word, right? Like, but this is not a concept here in America. Like, everybody will follow what the rules are, how
Yeah.
you're supposed to do it, but there is a smarter way of doing it also, which can lead you to the way quickly. How
Mm,
are you going to move to it? And again, like every time when you say jugaad, that doesn't mean that you are breaking a law. You are just making sure that your work is done faster.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's
Yeah.
not a concept here. It's not like, again, like this is one example of the word that I'm
Yes.
saying. But like in Dubai, if I was talking to somebody and I said, oh, this is my jugaad, right? Like the person would understand. But here I cannot use that word because, again, it's not very global.
Right, right. Wow, that's and I think we're tapping into linguistics in addition to communication because
Exactly.
you are absolutely right. So for instance, what you were sharing about when you're in Dubai, you might say inshallah or things that other people will often say in
Huh?
conversation. This is a means of fitting in, right? Just like how you
Yes.
are not using those words anymore in the US because those are not words that people will feel are welcome here that will make you feel like, okay, this fits. If anything,
Mm-hmm.
you might be using more slang words that you might hear in your immediate circles, like people, how they
Exactly.
choose to engage in conversations and whatever. You'll pick up those elements of communication just like you did in Dubai. That is so true. I have definitely experienced the same thing. Something else that you like the word jugar, which is really cool that I learned that today. It kind of translates to a more meaningful thing that does not need to be expressed fully, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's another reason why I believe in our cultures. Like even in Sinhalese, there's one word that just needs to change a letter and it can mean three different things. Like there is like for example, eat, right? There's kamu, let's eat,
Mm-hmm.
kanavada, should we eat? Do you want to eat? Like little details and the same
Details.
word transforms into so many different sentences. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's really difficult to translate that because it does not translate over here. But I can
Exactly.
just say one word, and that one word is communication enough for whomever is around me to understand what I mean. And so that's why I love that the communication conversation that we're having is also tying into linguistics. How does language get embedded into our
Mm-hmm.
communication? How do we add multiple languages? When I speak with you, sometimes even with your husband or sometimes with other friends from India, I will add words in Hindi into my language and sometimes even have the accent that comes out. And
Yes.
I often think I'm like, I don't even I mean I understand a good amount of Hindi, but I'm not a fluent speaker. But somehow I'm adding
Uh-huh.
these words and it's because I want you all to feel like you're
Uh-huh.
safe to connect with me, right? And so I'm
Definitely.
something that you experience as well.
No, and definitely like so again, as we are talking about communication, there was something that so me and my husband were introduced through our family, and for really long we spoke on calls, right? Like video calls or voice calls or whatever.
Yeah.
And for a really long time, he never spoke to me in his American accent. He only spoke to me in an Indian accent.
Mm,
For a certain reason I would be like, oh, is he lying that he spent his time here, or did he study here? Is that the truth or something? I was going on in my head about it. And then one fine day, like, he just broke out, like, I was on a call with him, and then he went to Smoothie King and he said banana and strawberries, and I was like, okay, we know that this guy has an accent just because I heard him place an order. So also, like, he thinks that it's easier for him so that people don't isolate him when he is with all his bunch of friends and his family here in America. It's easier for him to kind of communicate with his colleagues, his friends in the accent. But versus he feels it's safer for me to communicate in my normal accent when, or we would call it an Indian accent,
right.
when he's with people like with his family or with his back in India, or like even with me sometimes he does that, and he's like, so I was like, why do you do this with me? He's like, with you I do it is because like you bounce out the same energy to me. Like
Mm,
he's like, the moment you pick up accent, like my accent comes back, and I'm like, that's not happening with me because I spent a good amount of time back in India. So I don't think the accent is going to like follow me so soon. But yeah, so this is something that we both kind of like go with. And he is really, really good in the same sentence of switching his accents. I think you must have seen it. Like in the
yeah,
same sentence, he can go about and speak in two different accents. And I'm just like, that's a
exactly.
skill.
Exactly. And it is. It can be misunderstood if somebody is not recognizing
Yes.
that communication looks differently. And I know I'm kind of noticing the time and I wanted to ask you a question
Mm-hmm.
because I know we kind of went off on tangents on what
Yes.
communication even means, and we brought in culture, we brought in linguistics, we're bringing in personal examples of what it looks like to be in a confrontation, to be misunderstood, and then to have to like talk through something to figure out what's on the other side and what happens when there is no communication, like vocally there's no communication, but there is a lot of communication,
Uh-huh.
body language and signs and hand gestures and facial expressions, right? I'm an advocate for facial expressions. So my question was,
Always.
right, what's one truth about communication that's often misunderstood and could change the game if more people understood it?
What's one truth about communication? I would say, in limited words, be as clear as you can with what you're feeling, rather than people pleasing them to let them know what they want to hear. Say
Yeah.
your truth. If they want to deal with it, or if they will want to walk around it, they will. And if not, you know who is right or wrong for you, because you
Mm.
cannot change your truth.
Yeah, yeah. Something that right off to piggyback off what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people will perceive you differently than how you intended, like than what you intended to say. And something that's happened to me that I also was thinking about when I asked this question from you is my intention when I communicate something to you may be completely different than what you perceive my communication to be, right?
Uh-huh.
And that is often something that I really like to express. So when I communicate someone, especially when I know that my friend or family member, whoever it is that I'm communicating with, if I know that they are typically an anxious person, in addition to communicating what I wanted, I add context in the follow-up message. Like I will be like, by the way, the reason why I'm asking or saying this is because
Huh?
I'm thinking about blah blah blah. So I try to be more vocal with my intention behind the communication. Why am I
Definitely.
even talking to you about this? Why am I even asking you this question?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, and I learned this from my partner, he can get pretty defensive when I ask him a question because he perceives that I am only asking as an
Asking.
interrogation question and I'm going to attack him as soon as he answers the question. Which to me,
Definitely.
I'm like, what? That is not even what? No, hold up. And so I will reel it back and I'm like, let me walk you through my thought process, which ends up being me oversharing at that particular situation,
Exactly.
right? But then he's like, okay, now I know why you're asking me. Now I feel safe to answer this question. So to me, I wanted to come into the intention behind your communication. And when you are misunderstood, could it be that your intention was not received by the person on the other end who's listening to you and receiving your message?
Definitely. And as we are ending this, I would want to ask you another small question, which is going to be, are you one of them who loves texting or talking to somebody in person? Or now that our technology has gotten better, sending somebody voice notes? Because I'm going to answer it first. I'm more of a voice note and in talk as a person, because I feel
Uh,
like I can come across very rude when I'm trying to text. Well, that's not the case, but that's how it can come across. Again, English is not my first language, so communication does get difficult. So I'm throwing this question at you. What do you think, and how do you think people kind of pursue this? Because I'm sure a lot of people do face an issue with communicating, right? Like a line of communication.
right. So I have to agree with you. I believe you are the person that got me hooked on voice messages. I'm not a big fan of being on the phone, and I think it's because I like to think about my response and not feel like I'm put on the spot every time to answer what it is that I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking and feeling and whatnot, right? So I'm definitely a person that's leaning more towards voice messages because in text sometimes the communication is lost in translation or my
Yes.
emotion is not always expressed clearly or wherever that
Uh-huh.
person is, whatever thought process or feeling they're having in the moment when they read my message, they could receive me in a way that I didn't even intend to. And then I realized, wait a second, I could eliminate all of this by quite simply sending them a voice note and saying, by the way, this is why I'm saying what I'm saying. And I know between you and I, we send each other really, well, I will take ownership of this. I send really long voice notes where I go off on tangents, but somehow I still
Uh-huh.
come back to that main point. And you receive that well because you can now hear all of the different things that I was working through while I tried to communicate something through you in that moment. So thanks for the
It's
question.
just easier. Yeah. It's just easier. I feel voice notes or like a I see your point of like call that you're supposed to answer it right away. Even I'm getting a little off with the call, but like for me, because I left a lot of my friends back on the other side of the world, it's easier for me to communicate to them like via video calls and
Hmm.
like, trying to make sure that I have more screen time with them just so that we can
Yeah.
know and feel like what we look like and like what is happening in each other's life. But
Right.
honestly, yeah, today's generation, I don't think a lot of people like to engage in conversations in general, right? Like, and
Mhm.
when they do, they're not talking as much.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like it's a struggle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
honestly, like whoever has reached this far, I would want to throw up this question and please let us know in the comments below that what do you think of this? Like what is your personal experience? What is your take on communication, right? Like is it
Yeah.
too little? Is it too much? Or whatever we do is right and the other person needs to understand.
Hmm. I love that question. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I would want to know that I'm not alone in this. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out with us because we hope it made you feel more seen and heard because I feel affirmed communicating with Himgauri. I feel like we can both kind of resonate with each other in many ways. And I know there are other people out there who might be nodding their head while they're listening to us and maybe can contribute a little bit more so we can keep growing this awareness of what it means to communicate cross-culturally, multilingually, like with expressions and with body language and with all of the extra details that come with it. So this is If I'm Being Honest, where we're not promising perfection, but we are showing up as we are.
Until next time, stay real, stay honest.